Art Baylor, U.S. Marshal.
Robbie Treese, District Attorney from Lee County.
Will Matthews, Auburn Police Division.
Jay Jones, Lee County Sheriff.
Paul Register, Auburn Police Division.
Kelvin King, FBI Supervisor of Montgomery.
Douglas Strong, FBI Chief of Legal Counsel.
Clark Morris, Assistant United States Attorney in the Middle District of Alabama.
Andy Hughes, Houston County Sheriff.
Dave Sutton, Coffee County Sheriff.
John Richardson, ABC.
Christian Lerner, Humane Society of the United States.
Jeanette Reber, Humane Society of the United States.
Tim Rickey, ASPCA.
Terry Mills, ASPCA.
And this is Mr. Beck, U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Alabama.
Thank everyone for being here today. It's a really a sad day to me and the sad day of affairs in the state of Alabama to have to even indulge in this type of criminal activity and prosecution. I believe if Dante were alive today and were rewriting the Inferno, that the lowest places in hell would be reserved for those who commit cruelty to our animals and to our children. And today we're talking about animals. We're talking about a group of people who indulge in drug taking, drug selling, gambling, and brutality to those animals. The efforts today and the arrest of 10 or 12 people and eventually maybe 13 or 14 will, I hope, send a message to those who engage in this type of underground activity that law enforcement, state, federal, and local, will coordinate to try to drive out this scourge from this state and surrounding states. I want to especially thank Assistant U.S. Attorney Clark Morris for being patient with me, for me being patient with her, for her perseverance and coordinating the state, local, and federal law enforcement partners and agencies that are necessary to enforce and investigate and prosecute this type of activity. I want to thank the FBI for its assistance. I want to thank Paul Register, the police chief, and the Auburn Police Department for their undying effort to stay with us and to work on this case. Of course, we've had help from Sheriff Jay Jones and Sheriff Hughes and Sheriff Dave Sutton of Coffee County, and we appreciate that. And there's so many, I'd start naming people that I will leave them out, and of course it's not to slight them. But this has been a joint effort by not only our state and local and federal partners, but by the Departments of Public Safety here in Alabama, states of Georgia, Mississippi, and others. These arrests go from Georgia to Texas to Alabama and other parts. The bottom line of so many mistreated animals is not just the full picture here. There are over 350, 360 dogs that have been saved, we hope, and rescued as a result of this effort. But it is also the sad commentary, I think, on our affluent society who has to have this underground culture and indulgence of violence that we also see spreading over into our streets and into our homes. I'm going to introduce Doug, astrologer, who is the counsel for the FBI, and he will talk a little bit about what's going on, and others will have something to speak to say about this project.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. Good morning. First and foremost, I want to reiterate what Mr. Beck just talked about as far as our law enforcement partners. As you can see, it takes a multitude of resources, individuals who are committed to ensuring that this type of activity within our society is not acceptable, ensuring that it is investigated and prosecuted. Again, the utilization of resources from the ASPCA, Humane Society, as well as our law enforcement partners make this type of an investigation feasible for the FBI to engage in. Without their assistance and their cooperation and determination in this kind of an investigation, it would be almost impossible for us to be able to pursue and investigate these cases. Second of all, This case is much more than just about the inhumane treatment of these dogs. This is, again, about our society and the fact of the impact that these types of illegal drug activity have within our community. The level of violence that we have seen during the course of this investigation speaks volumes as to these individuals and what they are engaged in doing and the depraved heart in their activities. For this reason, that is why this kind of investigation is something that needs to be pursued, investigated, and prosecuted. And thank you for everything you've done, Mr. Beck. We really appreciate it, Clark. We really appreciate everything that's been done in this case. Next up, we want to introduce Chief Paul Register with Auburn Police Department.
Thanks, sir. Thank you very much. When you get into law enforcement, there are certainly those cases that you look at and understand and remember why you get into this profession. This would be one of those situations. The inhumane treatment that we've all seen during this case, we will not forget. We're the Auburn Police Division. We're very happy to be a part of this investigation. I want to thank personally the individuals from our agency that have worked very hard for more than a year on this case, and those that are here today. It's an example of a reminder that criminals do not know city limits or county or state lines. And cooperation like this and working together in such an effort is a proud moment for us, and we're glad to be a part of it. And we're just thankful for all the assistance and thankful to be a part of the assistance. And the citizens of this community and the state, this part of the country, should be very thankful for the efforts that have been put forth by these folks here today. Next will be the ASPCA and the United States Humane Society.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Chris Schindler with the Humane Society of the United States. I, as well as my colleagues, have been working with many of the individuals here for almost 3 years, and I cannot begin to express my gratitude to the many individuals here who worked countless hours and certainly, an extended period of time that ultimately led to more than 360 animals being spared the life of suffering at the end of a chain or at the hands of somebody in a bloody pit where they ultimately lose their lives. The significance of this operation is not just on the local level or the states that it's involved. This is a national operation. This will have significant implications throughout the country. And hopefully it will send a strong message to other individuals engaged that this will not be tolerated. The HSUS consistently works with state, local, and federal law enforcement. And we certainly are thankful to the FBI, the United States Attorney's Office, the Auburn Police Department, and all the other agencies represented here, because without them and without all of the groups, the ASPCA and all of the animal welfare groups that assisted, these animals and thousands of others would have suffered at the hands of these individuals. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm Tim Rickey. I'm the Vice President of the Field Investigation and Response Department for the ASPCA. And some of what I may say, it could be a duplication of what Chris just said, but it really bears being said twice. I can't express my gratitude enough for the FBI, for the U.S. Attorney, for the Auburn Police Department, and the many other law enforcement agencies, as well as animal welfare partners around the country that came together in this collaborative effort to rescue more than 360 dogs on Friday morning. This was a 3-year investigation, and I really commend law enforcement for aggressively pursuing this case. That this was an extremely long investigation, but as you hear the details of the case in the days and weeks to come, I think you will understand why it was so important that this investigation continue to be followed. Aside from the 360 dogs that were removed from horrendous conditions, there's also lots of other criminal activity that is involved with illegal animal fighting. On Friday morning, the ASPCA teams working with law enforcement went to more than 13 properties in Alabama and Mississippi, rescuing more than 250 animals from those sites alone. And HSUS, also working with law enforcement, conducted multiple operations as well. The conditions that we found on these properties were consistent with what we've seen in other dog fighting operations throughout the country. We commonly see animals that are kept in deplorable conditions, tethered to heavy log chains, in the middle of wooded areas and open fields, dogs that often have scars and other animal fighting paraphernalia that is indicative of illegal animal fighting. Today, these dogs are comfortable in the shelter being taken care of by ASPCA and HSUS responders. They're getting the food and water and medical care that they needed, and they're finally getting a loving hand from responders who care for these dogs. But sadly, there are many, many more dogs out there that are still going through this type of abuse. There are an estimated 40,000 professional dog fighters in the United States, and hundreds of thousands of dogs living in these deplorable conditions. So I'm encouraged that law enforcement has taken such an aggressive stand here. Within just the last 6 months, the ASPCA has worked with local, state, and federal law enforcement authorities to rescue hundreds of dogs from these type of environments in multiple states from dozens of different yards. But our fight continues on. As has been previously stated here, this is a significant problem. It is the worst form of animal cruelty for the animals, but it also translates into other criminal activity, and many of the individuals involved in animal fighting are violent criminals. So this is important police work, and we thank the FBI and all the other law enforcement agencies for recognizing that and pursuing that aggressively. Thank you.
We'll open this up for questioning, and if you have a particular question to a particular person, that person can address that also. Yes, sir.
The news release names 10 people. The indictment has an additional 9 on it called.
Well, without going into names, we don't know if everybody's been arrested yet. But that's the only reason is we only want to make public those who've been arrested.
Mr. Tibbins has been arrested.
He has been, so now they're all been arrested. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
For the local authorities, if you could speak to the fact if you were aware of this activity, and if you were aware of this activity, were you aware of the volume of activity in your communities?
Certainly we had heard over time bits and pieces of this type of activity possibly happening. I think once it came to the level where we realized that there was just as much as going on, then that's when everyone was working together on this. I will say personally that even until the end, I had no idea just how large maybe some of this activity was, and I was even surprised toward the end of it myself.
To some of those individuals that were on scene, can you describe what you saw? What were the conditions of the animals?
Again, I'm Dave Sutton of the Coffee County Sheriff's Office, and I believe it was very well described a while ago. These dogs were chained out to axles, car axles that had been buried in the ground with very heavy chains. They're kept at a distance from each other. They were very much infested with fleas in my area, and I believe a couple of them had to be taken to an emergency room. I know one did, but I just want to say this to all of you. Those animals can't speak like you and I. They bark and they whine. And we chose to speak for them. And I believe we've sent a message out. And I'll be there and continue to do this. These animals need to be taken care of. And these people need to be prosecuted. And I want to thank the FBI for doing this for me.
What message are you sending forward?
If you're going to do the crime, we're going to come see you. We're going to get you sooner or later. It took me 1.5 years with the FBI, and I nagged them and nagged them. They wouldn't tell me a lot, but at the end result, I'll just tell you this is one sheriff that's happy, happy, happy.
We just had a question text to us. Were any of the dogs stolen animals, or did the people own the dogs?
Not that we know of.
I think it's too early yet in the investigation to make that determination. We know they bet a lot of money
George, were they having the dog fights at the houses that y'all searched, or where were they doing the dog fights?
My understanding that the fights actually took place at various places and generally different from the actual location of the person who was arrested in the dog search, but someone else may have more information on that. Yes, ma'am.
If someone could speak to the reportedly dangerous nature of the people involved in these dogfighting rings, and there was also mentioned the other criminal activity that comes out of it. If someone could speak to those two things, please.
Well, we know generally that drugs, guns, and cash, money laundering goes on. We think this particular activity may have national, may go nationally, if not internationally. We think that those people who enjoy violence on the streets come together and engage in this type of violence in secret, and the people who are engaging in it, many of them already have criminal records. So it's an effort to get to the criminal element through just another source of their criminal activity. If others have any more specific information, then we'll be glad to share. And as the evidence comes out, I think you'll learn more and more about where these events took place and what activity went on.
Mr. Rickey, if you could speak to your organization's DNA database and what role that may play as the investigation continues.
Sure. Yeah, the canine CODIS was actually developed in 2009 following the Missouri 500, and that was an investigation Terry Mills led. I was involved in it as well. 500 animals were seized in 8 states, the largest dogfighting raid in U.S. history. And following that case, we took the opportunity to pull DNA from all of those animals so that we could begin matching up DNA with different dogs in yards. We know that this is a highly organized enterprise. These fighters are breeding animals, specific bloodlines, specific traits, and we wanted to begin matching those animals from one yard to the other. For example, in this case, we may find a connection between a dog that was seized in one of the Auburn area sites and a dog that was seized in Mississippi or Georgia. And that evidence really helps further the U.S. Attorney's case in proving the conspiracy, showing the connection between the different yards.
And how does this case compare to that case, that landmark case?
Well, I will tell you from the dog standpoint, that this case is very significant. Every single one of those animals that were removed on Friday morning, who are now being provided the care that they needed and the attention they deserve, that this was a monumental event. From our standpoint, the Missouri 500 is still the largest case in U.S. history, but this case is just as significant. This operation on Friday and this showing of law enforcement who are standing in this room just sent a significant message to dog fighters around this country that if they're going to continue to participate in this barbaric industry, the law enforcement are recognizing this, they're taking this serious, and they're coming after them. And the ASPCA is proud to be a partner in that, as I know the HSUS is as well.
Do we know exactly where a lot of these dogs were transported? I know a lot of them were taken to an animal shelter. We know if they were in the state or if they are outside of Alabama.
No. This is a criminal investigation, and it has been stated here, some of these individuals are potentially violent criminals. For that reason, these animals have been taken to undisclosed location that we will not release to the media for the safety of the animals and our responders who are taking care of them.
What kind of lifestyle will these dogs have after this? Will they be able to cope in a normal society, a home? Where do they go from here?
Our goal is to treat each one of these animals as an individual. The reality we can't deny is that these animals have been bred and many of them trained to fight. What we have done is bring in behaviorists who will begin evaluating the animal's behavior right away. That process is already going on, and we will begin working with each individual animal on behavior modification with the end goal to try to get as many of these dogs placed into safe homes as possible. This is a criminal investigation. These dogs are evidence, and they will be held for some time. But during that time, as things are going through the criminal justice system, we'll continue working every day, trying to improve the quality of life, trying to improve the placeability, and identify, fighting pit bull rescues around the country that are willing to open up their facilities to give one of these dogs a second chance. That's why organizations like the ASPCA and HSUS do this work, so that we can give these animals a second chance. If any animal ever deserved a second opportunity at life, it's one of these dogs that was pulled out of these yards on Friday.
I'm sorry, I missed the FBI spokesperson's name. You were speaking a little bit about violence and the culture of violence. Do you mean physical violence against other individuals, or what did you mean by that?
First of all, let me address that issue as far as it is an ongoing investigation. So at this time, we're not going to talk about any particulars as to any of these individuals involved in the current prosecution and investigation. But in general terms, as you can imagine, drug activity tends to be extremely violent.
Do we know how many counties in the state, I guess, were raided or searched for potential dog activity?
Well, at least 4. Here again, that gets into the details of the investigation, and we'd rather not do that.
Did you mention how big of a scope, how many people were involved in all these different rescues and raids?
I don't think I could count the number that are involved, but pretty certainly, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Marshal Service, who's always standing by to help, and we had counties and cities, and as I said, the public safety departments of these 3 states. So we had numerous individuals. We had some 13 search warrants we had to serve at one time, so that we would not alert those who were apprehending them. It took a massive effort, and it was well coordinated by Ms. Morris and others to get the local partners with the FBI and the state to do these things. That's it.
I know you say it's an ongoing investigation. Do you anticipate more arrests?
We can't comment on that. Of course, this investigation, this conspiracy will be stand on its own, and we can't comment on any ongoing investigation. We think, yes, sir.
There's some names blacked out on the indictment. Does that mean there are more people indicted that you're still looking for?
I don't have a copy of the indictment compared to the press release, but those who've been arrested, in addition to those on the press release, there's the one you mentioned earlier. And I would think that those who marked out just probably were not arrested at the time of the press conference.
What kind of penalty do these men and women allegedly, what could they get for this crime?
Well, we've got a gambling conspiracy in addition to the dog fighting, and we're looking for many, many years, depending on the leaders of this group, as opposed to those who may be simply described as followers, although we think all of these are participants to get the full extent of the law. And that'll be up to the judge, and of course, if and when these people are convicted and sentenced.
And you said the initial cause of the investigation was by local police, or was there an informant inside the group, or how did you originally?
Again, we can't get into that type of discussion at this time.
Is this a significant blow to the dogfighting community?
Well, as you've heard, it's extensive. It's nationwide, if not worldwide. We think it's highly organized. We hope it strikes a blow to them, and it certainly should send a message that not only the U.S. Attorney's Office, but state, local law enforcement are going to be behind it and cooperated, and it's a joint effort. As one officer said, there's no city boundaries, no county boundaries, no state boundaries. So it should serve as some type of notice or warning to those who want to engage in this type of activity. Thank you all very much for your patience.